What's up, everybody? In today's video, what I want to do is I want to do a deep dive into the seven churches in the book of Revelation, and I want to talk about the beautiful patterns that we can play, both from Torah and from the entire narrative of Scripture, as we work through what Jesus has told to each one of these seven churches, okay? Now, real quick before we get started, if you enjoy this content, I want to give a plug. Keep in mind, if you subscribe to this channel, it can really help us grow, so if you feel so moved, I would really appreciate that. Okay, with that said, let's go and hop into this content. So I've listed this in an earlier video, but in an earlier short, but you can trace the entire narrative of Scripture in the sequential order of the seven churches. So for example, the first church, the church at Ephesus, he begins by talking about God walking with them amongst the lampstands. It's very much so Garden of Eden language. And then it ends by saying, to he who conquers, I will give him access to the tree of life. So for example, the first church, Ephesus, you can relate to the time of the creation and of the Garden of Eden. Then the second church, the church at Smyrna, you can relate directly to the patriarchal period and to Joseph for various reasons. The third church, the church at Pergamum, you can relate to the Exodus narrative and to the wilderness wandering. The fourth church, the church at Thyatira, you can relate directly to the monarchical period. It talks about bronze pillars, like to do with this Temple of Solomon and the Star of David and various things. The fifth church, the first church at Sardis, you can relate directly to the prophetic period prior to the exile, or just the entire prophetic period. The sixth church, the church at Philadelphia, you can relate to the post-exilic time. And then the seventh church, the church at Laodicea, you can relate to the New Testament, the time of Christ and the apostles. Okay, but not only is that beautiful pattern present, but another thing that we see is we actually see the pattern of Torah played out in what Jesus says to each of the seven churches. So basically he begins, and do this as a thought experiment if you feel so moved, it's really cool. But he begins first with the pattern of Genesis. God reveals himself to the church and says who he is, okay, basically. Then the second thing he'll tell them has something to do with letting them know that he sees them, like the Exodus, the book of Exodus, and then he comes to be with them like in the tabernacle, okay? Then the third thing he does in a chiastic structure, if you know what that means, it's kind of like A, B, B, and then C in the middle. The third thing he does is he talks about what they're to do. Okay, so this goes with like the Levitical law. The fourth thing he does is he tells them, if you continue going this way, this is what will happen. It's very akin to the book of Numbers. And then the fifth thing he does is he says, if you conquer, this is what you will receive. It's the pattern of Deuteronomy, okay, and what Moses gives in his final exhortation before going into the land. So just throughout it, you can see these beautiful patterns, and when we see them, they really open this up to us. So that's what we have for today. God bless.